There are some children the world does not know how to hold, so it calls them burdens and looks away. There are some men so large and silent folks mistake their loneliness for meanness. But the Lord has a way of putting two unwanted souls at the same table and asking them to share bread before either one understands the blessing. In those days, a piece of gold could buy a horse, a roof, or a season of flour, but it could not buy trust. Trust had to be earned one morning, one chore, one small kindness at a time. The orphan girl stood on a crate inside the back room of Fincher's Mercantile with both fists balled in the skirt of her faded brown dress. Cecily Bradshaw was not a child, not quite. At 19, she had the thin wrists of hunger and the stillness of someone who had learned not to ask twice. Her black shawl had one torn corner, and under her arm she held a tin lunch pail with no lunch in it, only a folded letter, a bone-handled comb, and a little wooden lamb carved by a boy who no longer had the strength to whittle. 7 children huddled near the flour sacks behind her. The youngest, Nell, sucked 2 fingers and stared at the stove as if warmth were something a body could beg from across a room. Sammy kept scratching at a cracked patch on his elbow. 12-year-old Ruth stood straight as a fence post, trying to look fierce though her stomach gave a low, shameful growl. Ben held a broken boot sole against his chest, like it was a dead bird. Little Clara coughed into her sleeve and tried to hide the sound. Tom, who never spoke when strangers were near, held the carved lamb tight in one red hand, and Jacob, nearly 14, had his jaw set hard enough to break. Outside, wind dragged dust down the main street of Mercy Crossing, New Mexico territory. Wagon wheels creaked. A loose shutter slapped the livery wall. Church bells had rung an hour earlier for a funeral no one in that room had attended, because it had been for Cecily's mother, and the town had already decided pity was cheaper than help. Mr. Fincher stood at his office table with a ledger open before him. His spectacles sat low on his nose. Beside him were 3 town women in Sunday black, the sheriff with his Tums hooked in his belt, and Mr. Harlan Voss, banker, church elder, and owner of the orphan home that had burned 2 winters back and never been rebuilt. "We cannot keep them all," Voss said, tapping the ledger with one pale finger. "Mrs. Bradshaw left debts, rent owing, doctor's bill, burial costs. These children are no kin to Cecily by blood except the younger boy, Tom, and even that is uncertain by law." Cecily's chin lifted. "My mother took them in," she said. "That made them ours." One of the women sighed. "Sweet girl, sentiment want fill plates. They work," Cecily said. "Ruth can mend. Jacob can chop wood. Ben minds hens. I can cook, wash, bake bread, milk, keep accounts, dress wounds, set a table, mend harness if I have the all." "You are not a household," Mr. Voss replied. "You are a hungry girl with hungry children." Nell made a small sound then, not quite crying. Cecily stepped down from the crate and lifted the child against her hip, though Nell's legs were too long and Cecily's arms too tired. She swayed once without meaning to. On the table lay the memorable object that had drawn half the town. A small buckskin purse spilled open, showing 3 dull coins, 2 buttons, a thimble, and a silver wedding ring thin as wire. It was all Mrs. Bradshaw had left behind. Voss had placed it there, like proof. "We have spoken with families," he said. "Mrs. Abel might take the infant girl. Now is 4, Cecily said. 4, then. Mr. Keene could use Jacob at the brickyard. Ruth might be placed as a kitchen girl. The others, no." The word was quiet, but it struck the stove, the walls, the flour sacks. Mr. Fincher shut his ledger halfway. "Cecily, you were given the morning to find a guardian or a husband or wages enough to satisfy the debt. No man here will take on 8 mouths." The back door opened. Cold light entered first, then a shadow. Eli Sawyer ducked beneath the lintel, because he had to. The man was built like a barn beam raised upright, broad through the shoulders, thick at the wrists, his face browned by sun and scarred along one cheek where an old wound had healed silver. His hat was dust white, his coat plain, his boots mud-caked from country miles. He carried no smile. The room seemed to shrink around him. Folks called him the giant Loang, rancher from Widow Mesa. They said he lived with locked gates and spoke more to horses than people. They said he had once beaten a rustler near to death. They said he had buried a wife and a baby in the same storm and never allowed a woman to cross his threshold after. Eli looked at the children, then at Cecily, then at the little purse on the table. "What's the price?" he asked. Mr. Voss blinked. "This is not a stock sale, Sawyer." Eli took off one glove finger by finger. His hand was huge, rough, and marked with rope burns. From inside his coat he brought out a leather pouch and set it on the table. Gold struck wood with a heavy, unmistakable sound. Nobody moved. "Debt," Eli said. "Burial. Rent. Food. Owed. Name it." Cecily's grip tightened around Nell. The banker's mouth worked once before he answered. "You understand what you are offering." "I understand hunger," one of the women whispered. "He cannot mean to take them all." Eli's eyes did not leave Cecily's face. "Do you want them kept together?" She did not trust him. It was plain in the way she stepped half in front of the children. But Tom's cough scraped through the room, and Nell's head dropped against her shoulder. And behind her Jacob's stomach growled louder than any pride. "Yes," Cecily said. Eli pushed the gold closer to Voss. "Then they stay together. Before we go farther, tell me where this story is reaching you tonight. Leave your country in the comments. And if this kind of quiet frontier love touches your heart, please like, share, and subscribe so more listeners can find their way to the table with us." Mr. Voss opened the pouch. The coins shone against the dark wood like captured sun. Cecily stared at them, and shame rose hot under her skin. It was not gratitude she felt first. It was fear. Men did not put gold down for nothing. Not in Mercy Crossing. Not anywhere she had lived. "What do you want in return?" she asked. The room stiffened around the question. Eli glanced toward the children again. Ben had bent to tie his boot sole with a string. Clara's cheeks were flushed with fever. Ruth held Nell's dropped ribbon in her fingers and rubbed it smooth without looking down. "I needed a house kept," Eli said. "Meals cooked, laundry done, hens tended, garden planted come spring. Children can help if they're willing. I've empty rooms. For wages?" Cecily asked. "For wages. How much?" Mr. Fincher made a soft choking sound, as if bargaining after rescue was poor manners. But Eli did not look offended. $2 a week for you," he said. "Board for all. Clothing is needed. Schooling when the teacher comes circuit. Doctor if sickness turns." Cecily swallowed. "And if we displease you, you leave with 30 days' wages and the debts still paid. And the children." Jacob spoke for the first time. "You got locks on them empty rooms." Eli looked at him. "Doors have latches, no keys but mine. I'll take the keys out." The boy's eyes narrowed, unsure what to do with an answer that did not strike back. Cecily looked at the gold again. "Why?" Eli's jaw shifted. For a moment, the big man seemed less like stone and more like something weather had worn down. "Because nobody came for my boy either," he said. Silence lowered over the back room. Then he picked up Mrs. Bradshaw's thin wedding ring from beside the purse and set it gently in Cecily's palm. "This isn't debt," he said. No one spoke after that in quite the same tone. By sundown, they were riding west in Eli's long farm wagon, the children tucked between sacks of flour, beans, salt pork, and a folded piece of blue calico Mr. Fincher's wife had sent without meeting Cecily's eyes. The town fell behind them in a blur of windows and whispering faces. Cecily sat on the front bench beside Eli with Nell asleep against her lap, the child's breath dampening her shawl. The road to Widow Mesa ran through dry grass and gray-green mesquite, then climbed into country where red stones shouldered up from the earth. The sky was wide and copper at the edges. A hawk wheeled above them. Eli handled the reins lightly, though his hands looked made for splitting logs. For a long while, only the wagon spoke. Behind them, Ruth counted the food sacks under her breath, as if she feared they might vanish. Ben chewed a strip of jerky so slowly, it seemed he wanted it to last till morning. Clara dozed and woke coughing. Sammy asked 3 times whether there would be bread at the ranch, and each time Cecily answered yes, though she had not seen the place. Jacob kept his eyes on Eli's back. "You always carry gold?" the boy asked. "No, why today?" Eli watched the road. "Sold cattle in Las Cruces. Could have bought horses. I have horses. Could have bought a wife." Cecily turned sharply. "Jacob," but Eli's mouth barely moved. Not quite a smile, not quite pain. Wouldn't know what to do with one. That ended the talk. They reached the ranch after moonrise. The house appeared first as a darker shape beneath cottonwood trees, long and low, with a porch sagging at one end. A barn stood beyond it, roof patched in 3 colors of tin. The corral fence leaned where 2 posts had rotted. Near the pump, a bucket lay on its side in frozen mud. The place was not poor, exactly. There were cattle shapes beyond the rail, horses in the moonlit pen, hay stacked under cover. But the house looked unloved. No curtain glowed in the window. No smoke lifted from the chimney. No dog barked welcome. Eli climbed down and stood with one hand on the wagon wheel. "Stay here," he said. "I'll light lamps." Cecily listened to his boots cross the porch. The front door opened with a tired groan. A match flared inside. Then another. A yellow square appeared in one window. Then the next, Ruth whispered. "It looks empty." Cecily pulled now closer. "Empty can be cleaned." Eli returned carrying a lantern. In the light, Cecily saw the fine dust on his shoulders, the crease between his eyes, the way he looked toward the house before looking at them, as if apologizing to it. "There's a room off the kitchen for Miss Bradshaw," he said. 2 rooms upstairs for the children. Boys on one side, girls on the other. "Stove's cold. I'll bring wood." "I can light a stove," Cecily said. "I know. You don't know anything about me." "No," he said. "But you stood in front of 7 children with an empty pail and asked for wages instead of pity." He turned away before she could answer. Inside, the house smelled of old ashes, leather, mouse dust, and closed rooms. The kitchen was large, with a black iron stove, a rough pine table, 3 chairs, a bench, and shelves holding tin plates gone gray with disuse. A coffee pot sat on the stove, but its inside was dry as bone. The floor had not been scrubbed in months. A spider had made a patient kingdom between the window and the flour bin. Cecily sat now on the bench and rolled up her sleeves. "Ruth, find the plates." "Jacob, water from the pump." "Ben, see if there's kindling." "Sammy, sit with Clara." "Tom, keep Nell awake long enough to eat." The children moved before. Remembering this was not their house. Eli paused at the kitchen door with an armload of split cedar. Something flickered in his face when he saw them take positions, as if a clock long stopped had suddenly ticked. "There's beans cooked in the cellar," he said. "Cold biscuits, too." "Not fresh. Cold biscuits are still biscuits." He set the wood down. "I'll tend the horses." Cecily caught his sleeve before fear could stop her. His arm was solid under the coat. "Mr. Sawyer." He looked down at her hand, then at her. "Eli," he said. She let go. "I need to know the rules." His expression closed again. "No one goes in the locked room at the end of the hall. No child in the barn loft without me. Pump handle sticks. Redmare bites. Well, water's good. Don't open the north gate unless you want half my cattle in Mexico, that all?" He glanced toward the children. Nell had laid her cheek on the table. Clarice's cough rattled small and wet. "No one goes hungry if there's food in this house," he said. "That's a rule too." Then he left. Cecily stood very still for a breath. Then she built the fire. By the time Eli came back from the barn, the kitchen had changed. Not greatly. Dust still lay in corners, and the table still bore knife marks and dark stains. But fire burned in the stove. Beans simmered in a pot with salt pork shaved thin into them. Biscuits warmed in a cloth near the stove door. Cecily had found coffee and set it to boil. Ruth washed plates with a rag. Jacob had filled the bucket and stacked wood by size. Ben had discovered 3 eggs in a basket and held them like treasure. Now awoke enough to whisper, "Is it ours?" Cecily's hand paused over the pot. "It is supper." "That ain't what I asked." Eli heard it from the doorway. He removed his hat. "For tonight," he said. "It's yours." The child considered that. Then she dipped her finger in spilled flour and drew a crooked circle on the table. "Then I'll sit here." And she did. The first meal at Eli Sawyer's table was not fine. Beans, cold biscuits, 3 fried eggs cut into slivers so every child had yellow on the plate, and coffee for the adults. Clara could only manage broth. Sammy fell asleep sitting up, one hand still around his spoon. Tom ate without lifting his eyes, but when Cecily reached to take his empty plate, he whispered, "Leave the lamb beside me." She placed the wooden lamb near his tin cup. Eli ate standing near the stove until Cecily looked at him. "You paid for the table," she said. "You might as well sit at it." He looked almost startled. Then he sat at the far end, knees too long beneath the pine boards, shoulders hunched as if trying to take up less room than God had given him. No one thanked him. Not that night. Gratitude would have been too close to surrender. After supper, Ruth washed dishes until her hands reddened. Cecily took over and sent the girls upstairs. The boys followed Jacob, who checked the stairs for weak boards before letting Nell climb. When the kitchen emptied, the house seemed to exhale. Eli brought in 2 buckets of water and set them near the sink. "You don't have to scrub tonight. I know what I have to do." That was not an order. She looked at him then. "Really looked? I have lived under orders, Mr. Sawyer." I can hear the shape of one. His eyes lowered to the dishwater. "Eli," he said again, quieter. "And I'll mind my shape." Cecily did not know what to make of that. She slept little. Her room off the kitchen held a narrow bed, a washstand, and one quilt folded with military neatness. The window faced the yard, where moonlight silvered the pump. From upstairs came the restless sounds of children unused to full stomachs, creaking beds, a whispered argument, Clara coughing, Nell crying once in her sleep, and then quieting when Ruth murmured to her. Cecily kept her mother's ring under her pillow. Near midnight she heard Eli walk down the hall. His steps stopped outside the locked room. There was no sound of a key, no door opening. Only a man standing before something he could not enter or leave. In the morning frost glazed the pump handle. Cecily rose before dawn, wrapped her shawl tight, and found Eli already in the yard splitting wood. Each stroke of the axe was clean and hard. He had taken off his coat despite the cold. Steam lifted from his shirt. She worked the pump until water coughed into the bucket. "You should wait," he said. "For water, the handle kicks. So do mules." She braced her boot, pumped again, and caught the force when it jerked. The bucket filled. Eli turned back to the woodpile, but she saw the corner of his mouth shift. Breakfast was cornmeal mush with milk skimmed from a crock and molasses, thinned with hot water. At first the children ate too fast. Cecily put her spoon down. "Slow," she said. Sammy looked afraid. "Will there be more?" She did not answer too quickly. Lies made children hungrier. Eli reached for the pot and set it in the middle of the table. "There's more." Sammy stared at him. "All of it?" "As much as your belly can hold without making you sick." The boy's lip trembled with the effort not to cry. He took another spoonful and ate it slowly, eyes on the pot. That was how the ranch began changing, not with declarations, but with portions. Cecily made lists that first week on the back of old cattle notices. Flour low, lie soap needed. Clara's cough worsening. One window cracked. Girls' room blanket thin, henhouse latch broken, north fence sagged, garden choked, porch rail loose, coffee nearly gone. Eli found the list near the stove and returned from town 2 days later with sacks and bundles stacked so high in the wagon that Jacob whistled despite himself. "You buy the whole mercantile?" the boy asked. "No," Eli said. "Forgot nails." Cecily found wool stockings in the bundle. 7 pairs for children, 1 pair for her. She held them too long. That evening, while she kneaded bread at the table, Eli came in with his arms full of split wood and saw the stockings beside the flour roll. "They the wrong size?" "No, wrong color." "They're stockings." He waited. She pressed her palms into the dough. "I have not had a new pair since I was 15. He looked toward the stove, uncomfortable before her gratitude. "Feet matter," he said. She laughed once under her breath, not because it was funny, but because tenderness had come disguised as wool. Daily life took hold like seed in dry ground. Jacob followed Eli to the corral each morning, pretending he did not want instruction. The red mare bit at him once, and Eli caught the bridle before teeth met sleeve. "She warns with her ears," Eli said. "So do people," Jacob muttered. Eli gave him a long look. "Then learn ears." By the 3rd day, Jacob was cleaning hooves. By the 6th, he could throw a rope badly, but with conviction. He still slept with his boots beside the bed, ready to run, but he began leaving them untied. Ruth took over the mending basket and repaired Eli's torn work shirts with tiny, stern stitches. She hummed when she thought no one listened. Cecily noticed that Eli wore the mended shirts first, even when cleaner ones hung on the peg. Ben became Lord of the Hens. He named everyone, though 3 were nearly identical brown birds. He brought eggs in his cap and delivered daily reports. Mrs. General pecked Miss Abigail. "Why?" Cecily asked. "For a pry." Eli, drinking coffee, nearly choked. Little Sammy had a habit of hiding bread crusts in his pocket. Cecily found them hard and lint-covered on wash day. She said nothing at first. Then she began leaving a cloth bundle on the shelf near the door with 2 biscuits in it. "For anyone who might need road food," she said. Sammy stopped hiding crusts 2 weeks later, but he checked the shelf every morning. Clara's cough worried them all. She was 7, thin as a reed, with eyes too serious for her small face. At night, Cecily rubbed her chest with goose grease and onion, then sat by her bed listening. Eli rode for the doctor through sleet without being asked. He returned after dark with Dr. Bell and a packet of powders, his coat stiff with ice. Clara woke while the doctor listened to her lungs. "Am I being sent away?" she whispered. Eli stood in the doorway, hat in hand. "No, even if I cough?" "Especially then." She turned her face into the pillow. A tear slipped down the bridge of her nose. Cecily wiped it with the corner of the sheet. Tom remained the quietest. He followed Cecily from room to room and kept the wooden lamp near him always. He was 6, with dark curls and watchful eyes. When men raised their voices, he disappeared under tables. Eli discovered this by accident one afternoon when a saddle strap snapped and he swore in the barn. Tom vanished behind the feed bin. Eli found him there trembling, the lamb clutched tight. The big rancher crouched, which took effort. "Wasn't that you?" he said. Tom's eyes stayed wide. Eli reached for the broken strap and laid it on the ground between them. "A.T." Tom stared. "Leather's deaf," Eli added. "Still shouldn't have hollered." Tom looked from the strap to Eli's face. "Papa hollered before he hit." Eli went still. "I don't hit children," he said. Tom's voice was smaller than dust. "Everybody says till they do." Eli did not argue. He sat down in the straw, his back against the stall, and remained there with the boy until the trembling stopped. When Cecily came searching, she found them both silent, Tom leaning against Eli's boot as if by accident. That night, Cecily kept Eli's coffee warm. She did not tell him why. She only set the pot near the stove edge and covered the cup with a saucer. When he came in from checking a cow near calving, he found it there. His eyes moved from the cup to Cecily, who was mending Nell's dress by lamplight. "Coffee," she said. "I see. It burns if you leave it." "I know." She kept sewing. "So don't." He sat and drank it like it was something rare. The locked room remained at the end of the hall. Dust gathered beneath its door, though the rest of the house slowly surrendered to Cecily's hands. Curtains appeared in the kitchen, sewn from blue calico. The cracked window was patched with oiled paper until glass could be fetched. The porch rail was nailed firm. The garden was cleared of dead stalks. Laundry snapped on the line like small flags of survival. The table was scrubbed pale. The Bible on the shelf, once buried under old invoices, was dusted and placed near the lamp. Eli noticed everything and commented on almost nothing. But one morning Cecily found a proper broom leaning by the back door, bound in new straw. Another day, a jar of peppermint candy appeared for Clara after the fever broke. Later, Eli built a lower peg rail in the mudroom so Nell and Tom could hang their coats without dragging them on the floor. "Children can use the high rail," Cecily said, watching him smooth the wood. "They shouldn't have to climb to belong." She turned away before he saw what that did to her. Town did not leave them in peace. Mercy Crossing had many windows and little mercy. The first time Cecily came in with Ruth and Ben to buy sugar, the mercantile hushed so quickly Ben stepped behind her skirts. Mrs. Abel looked at the girl's clean dress, the ribbon in Ruth's hair, the list in Cecily's hand. "Well," she said, "Widow Mesa agrees with strays." Cecily felt Ruth stiffen. Mr. Fincher pretended to rearrange canned peaches. "We are not strays," Ruth said. Cecily laid a hand lightly on the child's shoulder, proud and afraid. "We need sugar, coffee, yeast, lamp oil, and 2 yards of toweling." Mrs. Abel smiled thinly. "On Mr. Sawyer's account, I expect." Paid in cash, Cecily placed coins on the counter. Wages Eli had handed her in an envelope, without watching her open it. Her name had been written on the front in blocky letters. Miss Cecily Bradshaw, wages owed. The storekeeper's eyes flicked to the coins. Of course, behind them, Harlan Voss entered with the sheriff. His gaze moved over Cecily's improved shawl, Ruth's mended cuffs, Ben's new boot soles. "How fortunate," he said, "though one wonders how long a solitary man's charity remains respectable." Cecily met his eyes. "Longer than a town's cruelty, I imagine." Ruth gasped softly. Fincher dropped a tin cup. Voss's face colored. "Mind yourself, girl. I am minding 7 children. A kitchen, 2 milk cows, 30 hens, a garden, laundry, bread, accounts, and a man who forgets to eat when a fence is down. I have no spare mind left for gossip." Ben tugged her sleeve. "Cecily, Mrs. General needs oyster shell." She looked down, put it on the list. When they returned to the ranch, Ruth told the story 3 times, each version making Cecily braver and Voss smaller. Eli listened from the woodpile, face unreadable. After supper, he came to the kitchen while Cecily was washing dishes. He spoke out of turn. She plunged a plate into soapy water. He spoke as he always does. "That isn't what I asked." She looked through the dark window above the sink. "Yes." Eli reached for the towel and began drying, awkwardly, as if dishes were unfamiliar livestock. "I'll go in tomorrow." "No. He owes you apology. He owes many people many things. I do not want you fighting my battles." His hand tightened around the plate. Cecily softened her voice. "I want the children to see me stand." Eli dried the plate slowly. "And if standing costs you, then they learn cost too." He set the plate on the shelf. "My wife used to say I tried to fix hurt like fence wire," he said. "Pull it tight enough and the gap closes." Cecily's hands stilled in the dishwater. He had never spoken of his wife. What was her name? Eli looked down at the towel. "Anna." The lamp hissed softly. Outside, a horse stamped in the cold. She liked yellow curtains, he said. Couldn't abide coffee boiled too long. Sang when she swept. Cecily waited. He swallowed once. Our boy was named Matthew. The locked room seemed to stand at the end of the hall, even from where they were. I'm sorry, Cecily said. Eli nodded, but his eyes were far away. Storm came early. I was in the south pasture bringing calves in. Roof beam cracked in the nursery. By the time I got back, he stopped. The towel hung limp from his hand. Folks said I should have hired help. Said no woman should be alone out here with a baby. They were right, were they? The question made him look at her. Cecily took the towel from his hand and folded it over the chair. Blame is a hungry thing, Eli. It eats whatever grief leaves behind. His face changed then, not breaking, but shifting as if the weight had moved half an inch. He said, That's too kind. No, it's only true. He left the kitchen soon after. Later, Cecily heard him stop outside the locked room again. This time, after a long while, she heard the key turn. The next morning the door stood open. She did not go in. None of the children did. But from the hallway she saw a small iron bed, a cradle, a wooden horse with one wheel missing, and yellow curtains faded nearly white. Sun lay across the floorboards like a blessing too gentle to touch. For 3 days, the door remained open. On the 4th, Eli carried the cradle to the barn loft and wrapped it in canvas. The little bed he sanded, repaired, and moved upstairs for Nell, who had been sleeping curled beside Ruth. Nell ran her hand over the bed rail. Was it somebody's? Alice's voice was rough. Yes. Did they love it? Yes, sincere? Then I'll be careful. That night, Nell slept without crying. Spring came reluctantly. Wind softened. Mud sucked at boots. The garden yielded to the hoe, clod by clod. Cecily planted beans, onions, squash, and marigolds, because her mother had always said a garden needed one foolish color to remind folks they were not beasts. Eli repaired the corral with Jacob and Ben. Ruth taught Clara to sew a straight seam. Sammy carried kindling in serious armloads. Tom followed the barn cats and whispered secrets to them. Nell sang nonsense psalms to the hens. A home formed in evidence. There was coffee at dawn and bread cooling by mid-morning. There were muddy boots lined under the mudroom bench. There were stockings drying by the stove, school slates on the shelf, a cracked blue pitcher filled with desert flowers, and a core list nailed near the pantry. Eli's coat began appearing on the lower peg, though he never admitted he liked it there. Cecily's shawl hung beside it. Still, she kept part of herself ready to leave. The envelope of wages under her mattress grew heavier. Every Saturday, Eli paid her exact, and every Saturday she counted the coins after he walked away. It was not distrust of him alone. It was knowledge. Homes could burn, mothers could die, towns could turn, men could change. One afternoon in late April, Harlan Voss came riding up with a paper folded in his breast pocket. Cecily saw him from the garden and straightened with dirt on her hands. Eli was in the far pasture with Jacob. Ruth was at the pump rinsing laundry. Clara sat in the sun shelling peas, stronger now but still thin. Ben was hunting eggs. Sammy and Tom built a corral from sticks in the dust. Nell wore a flour sack apron and carried one marigold like a queen. Voss dismounted without tying his horse. Miss Bradshaw, Mr. Voss. He looked over the yard, taking inventory of improvement as if it offended him. You have done well here. Was there business? He smiled. Indeed. I have located a couple in Santa Fe willing to take 2 of the girls. Ruth and the little coughing one. Clara dropped a pea. Cecily stepped forward. No, the Bradshaw debt might be paid, but guardianship remains unsettled. Sawyer is not kin, nor are you legal mother to these children. The court in Las Cruces will hear a petition next month. Ruth came from the pump with wet hands. Cecily, Voss pulled the paper halfway from his pocket. There is also concern regarding the propriety of your arrangement. A young unmarried woman living under the roof of a widower. You should leave, Cecily said. He smiled wider because he had found the bruise. You mistake your position. Gold on a table might impress Fincher. But law is law. Clara began to cough, not hard but frightened. Tom backed under the porch. Sammy stood in front of Nell with his stick corral clutched like a weapon. Cecily wiped her hands on her apron and looked toward the pasture. Eli was a dark shape at a distance, too far to hear. "What do you want?" she asked. "Return to town. Take a respectable placement in my household until matters are determined. I need a housekeeper. You might bring the youngest boy temporarily. The others will be placed," Ruth whispered. No, Cecily's heart beat against her ribs, but her voice stayed calm. "You came when he was gone. I came when business required. You came when the man you fear was gone." His face hardened. "Careful." From beneath the porch came Tom's small voice. "Don't make us go." Voss looked toward the shadow. Children seldom know what is best. Then the north gate banged open. It was not Eli. It was the wind, catching the loose latch Ben had not properly fastened. 3 cattle pushed through, then 2 more. One spotted steer trotted straight toward the laundry line, dragging sheets down into mud. For one absurd second, everyone stared. Then Cecily moved. "Ruth, take Clara inside. Sammy, get Nell on the porch. Ben, grain bucket. Tom, stay where you are." She snatched a coil of rope from the fence post and ran, skirts gathered in one hand. Voss stepped back, startled. Cecily cut across the yard, slapping the rope against her palm and shouting the sharp, steady calls she had learned from watching Eli. The steer veered. Ben appeared with the grain bucket, shaking it hard. Ruth, instead of going inside, grabbed the laundry pole and swung the fallen sheet wide, making a white wall. Sammy yelled from the porch with all the ferocity his small chest could hold. The cattle turned clumsily back toward the gate. Cecily reached it first and dragged it wider, mud sucking at her boots. One steer swung too close. Its shoulder struck her and threw her against the post. Pain flashed white down her side, but she held the gate. "Now, Ben." The boy hurled a handful of grain inside the fence. The cattle followed. Cecily slammed the gate and dropped the latch. Only then did she see Eli riding hard from the pasture. He came in with dust flying behind his horse, Jacob clinging to the saddle of another. Eli dismounted before his gelding had fully stopped. His eyes went to Cecily's muddy dress, her hand pressed against her ribs. Voss, standing in the yard with papers. "What happened?" "Gate open," she said. Nah, Voss lifted his chin. "I came to discuss lawful placement." Eli turned. The yard changed. Even the hens seemed to hush. "You came onto my land," Eli said, "to threaten my household while I was gone. Your household has no legal standing." Eli took one step closer. Voss stepped back before catching himself. Cecily reached for Eli's sleeve. "Dawn," he stopped because she asked, though his whole body looked like a storm held behind skin. Voss's voice sharpened. "This is exactly the brutish temper people fear. You cannot buy children like cattle, Sawyer." "No," Eli said. "I can't, but I can hire a lawyer." Voss laughed. "With what education in family matters? With gold." Eli's voice was flat. "The kind you noticed." Cecily's fingers tightened on his sleeve. Voss folded the paper. "Court will decide. Then court will hear how you try to split fed children from the woman feeding them. They are orphans." Eli looked toward the porch. Nell had both hands clamped over her ears. Sammy stood in front of her, shaking. Tom peered from the darkness under the boards. Clara leaned against Ruth, pale. "No," Eli said. "They are named." Voss said nothing. Eli pointed toward the road. "Get off my land." After Voss rode away, no one moved for a long while. Then Clara began coughing in earnest, and the house rushed back into life. Cecily tried to step and nearly folded. Eli caught her before she hit the mud. His arms came around her with such care that it frightened her more than roughness would have. She felt the strength in him, and the restraint, the choice. "I can walk," she said. "I know." He carried her anyway. Inside, he set her on the kitchen chair. Ruth fetched water. Clara cried because she thought it was her fault. Ben stood in the corner whispering, "I left the gate. I left the gate." Jacob swore vengeance on Voss, the steer, and possibly the wind. Nell crawled under the table with Tom. Cecily pressed a hand to her ribs and breathed shallow. Eli knelt before Ben first. "Look at me." The boy shook his head. "Benjamin." Ben looked. "Did you open that gate on purpose?" "No, sir." "Did you help get the cattle back?" "Aye, sir." "Then you made a mistake and helped mend it. That's work. Shame has no chore here." Ben's face crumpled. Eli put one hand on the boy's shoulder. "Latch it twice tomorrow." Ben nodded hard and wiped his nose. Cecily watched through pain, and something inside her ached worse than her ribs. That night, after the children slept and Dr. Bell had declared nothing broken, Cecily sat wrapped in a quilt beside the kitchen stove. Eli brewed coffee badly and brought her a cup. It tasted scorched and thin. She drank it without complaint. "You should have told me about Voss," he said. "I did not know he would come." "You knew he might." She looked at the fire. "I knew the world might." Eli lowered himself into the chair opposite her. "I'll ride to Santa Fe," he said. "Hire a lawyer. Petition for guardianship." Her cup stopped halfway to her lips. "For the children, yes, and me." His eyes flicked up. "You are not a child." "No. I am the obstacle." "That's not what you are." She gave a small tired laugh. "In-law, I am nothing useful. Not mother, not sister to most of them, not wife, not widow with standing, not owner of land. Just Cecily Bradshaw, with a dead mother's promise." Eli leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "Promises can stand, not in court." He said nothing. The silence stretched between them, filled with fire crackle and the soft settling of the house. From upstairs came Clara's sleep cough, gentler now. Outside, wind moved along the eaves. Cecily set the cup down. "I could marry someone in town. Some widower needing help, if it gave the children a legal roof." "No." The word came out before he could soften it. She looked at him. Eli's face darkened with regret. "I mean, don't make yourself payment. I have been payment since I was old enough to carry a wash bucket. Out here most of all. You laid gold on a table." His jaw tightened, not with anger at her, but at the truth. "Yes," he said. "And I've been trying every day since not to make you feel bought." The room went still. Cecily's eyes stung. "Why did you really do it?" Eli reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in worn cloth. He set it on the table and unfolded it. A baby's shoe. Brown leather, cracked, no longer than his toe. Cecily looked at it and forgot to breathe. "I keep it with me when I ride to sell cattle," he said. "Don't know why. Foolish my bay." His hand rested near the shoe and did not touch it. "That morning in town, I heard Voss saying, 'No man would take 8 mouths.' I looked at Tom holding that wooden lamb. I thought of Matthew's shoe in my pocket. Thought my bay the worst thing in this life is not losing what you love." His voice roughened. "My bay at seeing love in front of you and letting law or fear break it apart." Cecily reached across the table, slowly, giving him time to refuse. He did not. She touched the back of his hand just once. Eli closed his eyes. The touch lasted no longer than a breath. It changed the room anyway. He left for Santa Fe 2 days later. Cecily wanted to stand in the yard and watch him go like any calm housekeeper, seeing her employer off on business. Instead, she packed biscuits, salt pork, coffee, and a small jar of peach preserves into his saddlebag. "You'll forget to eat," she said. "I eat when reminded by horses. Sometimes they're persuasive." She tucked the jar deeper. "Do not pay the first lawyer everything he asks. Ask whether he has argued before a territorial judge. Ask what papers are needed. Ask about guardianship through employment and household provision. Ask, Cecily. She stopped. Eli stood beside his saddled horse, hat brim shadowing his eyes. The children waited near the porch, each pretending not to listen. "I'll come back," he said. It was not a grand sentence. It did not promise victory or love or forever. But Cecily had been left by death, by town pity, by men who said help and meant use. The words entered her carefully, as if finding a locked room. She nodded. "See that you do," he rode out. His absence changed the ranch by revealing his place in it. The wood pile lowered. Jacob tried to split logs and blistered both palms, then hid them until Cecily caught him hissing over the wash basin. "You cannot become him by bleeding," she said. The boy glared. "Somebody has to be a man here." "You are 14. Almost. You are allowed to be 14 here." His anger faltered. She wrapped his palms in clean cloth. "A man is not the one who never needs help. A man is the one who does not run when someone else needs it." Jacob looked toward the road. "Think he'll run?" Cecily tied the bandage gently. No, the answer surprised them both. On the fourth day, rain came hard, not the gentle spring kind, but a cold, slanting rain that turned the yard to black mud and filled every low place. The barn roof leaked over the hay. The pump path became slick. Clara's cough stirred again. Nell cried because thunder shook the windows. Tom hid in the pantry behind the flour sack. Sammy placed his biscuit bundle beside him without a word, then sat guard outside the pantry door. Cecily worked until her dress hem was soaked and her fingers numb. Ruth helped move pans under leaks. Ben brought hens into the shed one by one, scolding them like disobedient ladies. Jacob, bandaged hands and all, tried to secure the barn door against the wind. Near dusk, a rider came through the rain. For one wild moment, Cecily thought it was Eli. She stepped onto the porch, heart already rising. It was not. A young man dismounted, handsome beneath a city hat, with a mustache trimmed too neat for trail weather. Daniel Price. Cecily knew him from Mercy Crossing. He had once brought her mother medicine on credit, and then suggested Cecily might repay with kindness. She had refused him with a butcher knife in her hand. He had laughed then. He was not laughing now. "Miss Bradshaw," he called through rain, "you look worn to thread. What business?" He came to the porch without invitation. "Mr. Voss sent me. Court papers will be filed. There's talk Sawyer might not be fit. Violent past. Unsound grief. No female kin in residence except you, and your reputation. Well, fragile things tear easy." Cecily stood between him and the door. Daniel smiled. "I can help. Marry me. I'll take you and the youngest too. Voss can place the rest kindly." Better than losing awe, the door behind Cecily opened. Ruth appeared, face pale. Nell clutched her skirt. Tom peered from behind the frame. Cecily felt the children listening. "No," she said. Daniel leaned closer. Rain dripped from his hat brim. "You always were proud for a girl with empty cupboards. They're not empty now, because Sawyer filled them. You think that makes you safe? Men like him want quiet women and grateful children. He bought you in front of witnesses." Cecily's hand closed around the porch broom. "He paid a debt. He laid gold down and took you home." The words struck because they were what she had feared, what town believed, what pride whispered at night. Daniel saw it land. "Come away before he returns. I have a wagon at the road. You can say you chose respectability." Behind her, Tom whispered. "Don't go." Cecily looked down at the broom in her hand. Its new straw was worn now from sweeping a house back to life. Eli had bought it without ceremony. She thought of warm coffee, lower pegs, Clara's doctor, Ben forgiven, Matthew's shoe, the open door at the end of the hall. Then she lifted her eyes. Respectability that splits children is only cruelty wearing clean gloves. Daniel's smile vanished. "Move off this porch," she said. He laughed once and reached for her arm. Jacob came from the barn with a pitchfork. He was soaked, muddy, and shaking with fury. "You heard her." Daniel turned. "Put that down, Moy." Ruth stepped beside Cecily, holding the iron stove poker. Ben appeared with two furious hens under his arms, which might have been comical if his face had not been so brave. Sammy stood behind the door with Tom's wooden lamb held like a stone. Nell cried silently. Clara coughed and still stood. Cecily did not move. Daniel looked at them all and saw, perhaps for the first time, that unwanted children could form a wall. He backed into the rain. "You'll regret this?" "No," Cecily said. "I have regretted hunger. I have regretted fear. I have never regretted refusing a man who mistook need for permission." He rode away. That night, Cecily made bread though flour was running low and the storm made the stove smoke. The children were frightened, so she gave them work Ruth needed. Ben greased pans. Sammy counted raisins from a jar, 7 for the dough and 1 for each child. Tom placed the wooden lamb in the center of the table. "Do what?" Nell fell asleep on 2 chairs, pushed together. Clara leaned against Cecily's side while the loaves rose. When the bread came out, the smell filled the kitchen with such aching comfort that Ruth began to cry. "I thought, if we lost this place," she whispered, "I would not remember how warm it was." Cecily drew her close. "Then remember," she said. "No court can take what you know warmth feels like." But after the children slept, Cecily packed. Not much. Her mother's ring, her comb, 2 dresses, wages, the letter from her mother, creased soft from rereading. She told herself she would go to Las Cruces, find work, hire counsel with her own money, remove the stain from Eli's name by removing herself from his roof. If she were not there, Voss could not use propriety against him. The children might stay. Eli might win. At dawn, rain thinned to mist. Cecily stepped into the kitchen with her trunk in hand. Eli stood by the stove. His coat was dark from travel. Mud covered him to the knee. His eyes were bloodshot with exhaustion. On the table lay a packet of legal papers tied with red string. For a moment neither spoke. Then he looked at the trunk. "No," he said, the same simple word he had used before, but this time there was no command in it, only fear. Cecily set the trunk down carefully. "You came back early, changed horses twice. You should have slept. You're leaving for the children." "Nah, Eli." He crossed the room, then stopped short, keeping distance as if she were a skittish mare. His hands opened and closed once at his sides. "I brought papers," he said. "Lawyer says I can petition. Says your mother's letter matters. Says if you testify you've been caring for them. Court my appoint guardianship jointly, or grant me legal guardianship with you as household matron. Under contract," she repeated. "And if that isn't enough," he swallowed, "I'll sell the south pasture. Hire the best counsel in the territory. I'll stand in any church, any court, any street, and say I brought you here because those children needed bread, and you needed a roof, and because I needed." He stopped. Cecily's hand tightened on the trunk handle. "What did you need?" His voice dropped. "A reason not to let this house die with my debt." The stove popped softly. He took 1 step closer. "Don't leave to save my name. It wasn't worth much before you spoke it." Tears blurred her sight. "They will say I was bought. Then they'll say I was the one redeemed." She looked at him through the quiet kitchen, at the giant rancher who had laid gold on a table, but now stood empty-handed before her. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I know. I don't know how to stay without waiting for the leaving. I know that too." He reached into his pocket, but not for gold. He drew out a key and placed it on the table between them. "The front door," he said. "Back door, pantry, desk, every lock in the house except the gun cabinet. You keep them. No one is kept here. not even by kindness. Cecily looked at the keys. Then she sat down hard in the chair, covered her face, and wept without sound. Eli did not touch her at first. He moved to the stove, poured coffee, set a cup near her hand, and stood guard over her silence. After a while, she reached for his sleeve. Only then did he kneel beside her chair. She rested her forehead against his shoulder. He closed his eyes as if struck. The court hearing came in May, when the desert was blooming yellow and the road to Las Cruces ran clear beneath a hard blue sky. Eli drove them in the wagon, Cecily beside him. The children washed and dressed in their best, Jacob holding the legal packet as if it were a rifle. Mercy, crossing, turned out to watch them pass. Mrs. Abel stood before the church. Fincher paused in his doorway. Daniel Price leaned against the livery, one cheek bruised from some unrelated tavern matter, and his pride still uglier than the mark. Harlan Voss waited near the courthouse in a black coat that made him look narrower than ever. The hearing room smelled of dust, ink, wool, and nervous bodies. The judge had white whiskers and tired eyes. He listened while Voss spoke of impropriety, instability, and the danger of leaving children in a remote ranch under the influence of grief and a young woman without legal status. Then Cecily stood. Her hands trembled, so she placed them flat on the table. "My mother, Margaret Bradshaw, took in children no one else wanted," she said. Not because she was rich, because she remembered being unwanted. When she died, the town saw 7 mouths. I saw Ruth, who mends straight seams when frightened. Jacob, who pretends he is grown because he fears no one else will be. Ben, who knows every hen by name. Clara, who coughs but still shells peas for supper. Sammy, who saved bread because hunger taught him not to trust morning. Tom, who hides when men shout and keeps a wooden lamb because my mother told him he was gentle, not weak. Nell, who asks if a table is hers before she sits. The judge leaned forward. Cecily took her mother's letter from the packet. She asked me to keep them together. I have no land, no title, only work. But work has kept them fed. Work has cleaned beds, boiled sheets, baked bread, planted beans, carried water, held fever, mended trousers, and made a house fit for children. Mr. Sawyer gave shelter, wages, doctor care, schooling money, and protection without laying a hand on their dignity. If law cannot see family because blood is missing, then law should come to our table and watch who passes the bread. No one breathed. Voss rose. Emotional theatrics cannot erase the appearance of moral compromise. Eli stood then. The room seemed smaller for it. I love my wife, he said. I love my son. I failed to save them. After that, I let a good house rot because I thought emptiness was what I deserved. The day Mrs. Bradshaw was buried, I saw this woman stand between hunger and children with nothing but her body. I had gold. She had courage. Mine was easier to spend. A murmur moved through the room. Eli turned slightly, looking not at the judge, but at Cecily. I did not buy Cecily Bradshaw. No man could. I paid what cowards had counted while children starved. I hired her because she knew how to make life out of almost nothing. And if this court needs a vow from me, here it is. Voss smiled faintly, expecting perhaps a marriage proposal made under pressure. Eli faced the judge. I will sell every acre but the house pasture before I let these children be split for convenience. I will put their names in my will. I will answer for their schooling, doctoring, food, and shelter. I will also place half the Widow Mesa house and working land in trust, with Cecily Bradshaw named as steward for the children's benefit, whether she stays under my roof or not. Cecily turned sharply. Eli, he did not look away from the judge. Voss lost color. That is excessive. No, Eli said. Gold on a table was the beginning. This is the answer. The judge removed his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. Then a small voice rose from the bench behind them. It was Tom, Sear. The judge looked over. Yes, son. Tom stood, wooden lamb clutched in both hands. If you send me away, can I take him? Cecily's heart cracked open. The judge's voice gentle. The lamb? Tom nodded. Mrs. Bradshaw said he knows the way home, but I don't want him to have to. The room went silent in a different way then. Even the men who had come for gossip looked down at their boots. The judge put his spectacles back on. I am inclined, he said slowly, to appoint Mr. Eli Sawyer, legal guardian, under supervision of the court for 1 year, with Miss Cecily Bradshaw recognized as contracted household matron and primary caregiver, wages protected, residence voluntary, and the children kept together at Widow Mesa Ranch, pending review tours. The trust papers will be filed. Mr. Voss, your objections are noted. Voss opened his mouth. The judge's eyes hardened and exhausted. Outside the courthouse, sunlight struck Cecily so brightly she had to blink. Ruth threw both arms around her waist. Ben whooped until the sheriff told him to mind the peace. Clara cried and coughed at once. Sammy asked if court meant supper would still happen. Nell demanded to know whether judges liked molasses. Jacob stood apart, wiping his eyes angrily with his sleeve. Tom walked to Eli and held up the wooden lamb. He can find the way home, Tom said, but you can hold him till we get there. Eli took the lamb as if accepting a sacred thing. On the ride back, Cecily sat beside him with the court order folded in her lap. The children slept in a tangle behind them, worn out by fear and relief. The wagon wheels hummed over the road. You should not have put land in trust without asking me, she said. I know. You do that often. Make enormous decisions and stand there like a fence post. Yes, at least you're honest. He glanced at her. Are you angry? Yes, he nodded. I am also grateful. He nodded again. And frightened, I figured. And I do not know what I am to you. The reins shifted in his hands. The horses walked on, steady and unhurried. Ellie's voice was low. You are the first person in 5 years who made me want mourning. Cecily looked down at the court papers until the words blurred. That is not a small thing, she said. No. She reached across the space between them and rested her hand, palm up, on the wagon seat. After a moment, Eli placed his hand over hers, carefully, like he was afraid of crushing hope by holding it too hard. They rode that way until the ranch came into view. Summer settled over Widow Mesa with heat, flies, and work enough to humble everyone. The garden climbed holes and spilled vines. Hens scratched under the porch. The repaired fence held. Curtains moved in clean windows. The lower peg rail stayed crowded. Eli built a long bench for the table because chairs were no longer enough. Cecily did not become soft. She became rooted. She argued with Eli over accounts and won often enough that he began bringing ledgers to her before making purchases. She taught Ruth household sums and Jacob feet measurements. She traded eggs for cloth in town and looked Mrs. Abel in the eye while doing it. She sat up with Clara on damp nights, made onion syrup, and later watched the child run clear-voiced across the yard for the first time without coughing. She gave Sammy the job of flower keeper, so he would learn abundance by measuring it. She made Tom speak one sentence at supper each night if he wished, never forcing, always leaving space. She let Nell choose marigolds for the table, even when the stems were too short and the petals dropped into the gravy. Eli changed too, though slower and with more resistance. He learned not to enter the kitchen with bad news while children were eating. He learned to say, "That scared me," instead of only going quiet. He learned that a child could break a cup and not need a lecture on cost before needing assurance that hands were uncut. He learned to drink coffee before it burned because Cecily would raise one eyebrow from across the stove. He learned that grief did not leave because laughter entered. It simply made room. One evening near harvest, the town came to Widow Mesa, not all of it, just enough. Fincher arrived with a crate of peaches and his hat in both hands. Mrs. Abel came with a quilt she claimed had no proper use sitting in a chest. The sheriff brought nails. Dr. Bell brought peppermint. Even the schoolteacher, Miss Lottie Crane, rode out to discuss lessons twice a week. Harlan Voss did not come. Daniel Price had left for Arizona after a gambling debt made Mercy Crossing less comfortable. They set a table outside under the cottonwoods. Cecily baked chicken pie, beans with molasses, 3 loaves of bread, and a dried apple cake. Ruth placed plates. Ben chased hens away from the biscuits. Sammy guarded the butter with solemn authority. Clara sang half a hymn before growing shy. Tom showed Miss Crane the wooden lamb, then permitted her to admire it from a distance. Nell told the sheriff he was sitting in her chair, and then graciously allowed him to borrow it. Eli stood at the edge of the gathering, uncomfortable with so many voices on land that had known silence too long. Cecily found him by the porch. "You look ready to saddle a horse and flee." "I was considering the gray," she limps. "I go slow," she smiled. He looked at the table, the children, the neighbors eating food from dishes. Cecily had scrubbed back to brightness. "Never thought I'd see this place full. Does it hurt?" "Yes," he said. Then after a moment, "Not only." She understood. Mrs. Abel approached before Cecily could answer. The woman's face had lost some of its sharpness, or perhaps shame had softened it. "Miss Bradshaw," she said, "I spoke poorly of you." Cecily waited. "I was wrong. It was not elegant. It was not enough for every whisper. But it was public, and Ruth heard it, and Jacob heard it, and Eli Sawyer heard it with his shoulders squared beside Cecily. "Thank you," Cecily said. Mrs. Abel nodded and returned to the table. Eli looked at Cecily. "You deserve more." "I know." The answer surprised a laugh out of him. A real one, low and brief. She treasured it without showing him too plainly. After supper, when the dishes were stacked and the neighbors had ridden home under a lavender sky, the children grew drowsy in the warm dusk. Clara slept with her head in Ruth's lap. Sammy curled beneath the bench, one hand on his full stomach. Ben carried the last crumbs to the hens. Jacob leaned on the repaired fence beside Eli, no longer trying to stand taller than he was. Tom placed the wooden lamb on the porch rail facing west. Nell put marigolds in a chip cup at the center of the table. Cecily gathered plates. Eli took them from her hands. "I can carry dishes," she said. "I know." He carried them anyway, and she let him. In the kitchen, lamplight glowed against the blue curtains. The stove held a steady warmth. Coffee waited at the back, not burned. The table was scarred, scrubbed, and crowded with evidence. Flour dust, a school slate, Eli's glove, Ruth's needle, a button Nell had found, the court order tucked safely beneath the Bible, and Cecily's mother's ring resting for a moment beside the bread knife while she washed her hands. Eli set down the plates. "There's something I've been meaning to ask," he said. Cecily dried her hands slowly. "About accounts?" "No." "The south fence?" "No." "Then you had better ask before I guess something foolish." He took off his hat, though they were indoors. The gesture made her heart turn over. "I want ask out of need," he said. And I want ask because of the children, though I love them. I want ask to quiet gossip. I want ask to bind you to land or debt or gratitude." He stopped, gathering courage with visible effort. "I am asking because when you are not in a room, I look for you before remembering where you've gone. Because coffee tastes wrong if I haven't heard your voice that morning. Because this house was shelter when you came, and now it is home. Because I love you, Cecily Bradshaw, and I would count it an honor if someday, when you are ready and only if you are free in the saying, you would marry me." No instant answer came. Outside, children murmured. A horse blew softly in the corral. The lamp flame leaned and straightened. Cecily looked at this man who had once seemed made of grief and silence. This giant lone rancher who had laid gold on a table before a town that saw burdens instead of names. She thought of every step between that day and this one: wool stockings, warm coffee, open keys, a baby shoe, courtroom sunlight, a lower peg rail, a child sleeping easier in a bed once loved by another child. Love had not arrived like lightning. It had come like bread rising in a warm place, slow and living. She reached for her mother's ring and slid it onto her finger. "This ring is not a promise to you," she said. "I understand. I tapped to her. Yes." Then Cecily took his hand. "But I have room for another promise." His breath left him. She smiled through tears. "Ask me again after harvest, Eli Sawyer. Ask me when the beans are put up, the roof is patched, Clara's winter coat is sewn, and Jacob admits he likes school. Ask me when I can stand before God and these children with no fear that I am choosing from hunger." Eli bowed his head over her hand and held it there. "I'll ask after harvest," he said, "and I will say yes." His eyes lifted to hers. For once, there was no shadow strong enough to cover what moved through his face. Autumn came gold over Widow Mesa. Beans dried in sacks. Apples lined the pantry shelves in jars. The roof was patched. Clara's winter coat hung finished on the peg rail, brown wool with blue cuffs. Jacob did not admit he liked school, but he stopped complaining when Miss Crane praised his figures. That was near enough. Eli asked again on a Sunday evening, while the family table stood set with roast chicken, potatoes, bread, butter, peach preserves, and a small cake Ruth had guarded from Nell's fingers all afternoon. He asked in front of the children, because love in that house had never belonged to only two people. Cecily said yes. Nell cheered. Ben knocked over his milk. Sammy asked if weddings had extra pie. Ruth cried openly and did not pretend otherwise. Clara hugged Cecily around the waist. Jacob shook Eli's hand with great seriousness before turning away to hide his face. Tom placed the wooden lamb between Eli and Cecily on the table. "So he knows," Tom said. "Knows what?" Eli asked. Tom smiled a little. "The way home." They were married in the small church at Mercy Crossing with sunlight through plain glass and marigolds in a jar on the altar. Cecily wore a cream dress she and Ruth had sewn by lamplight. Eli wore a black coat that fit poorly in the shoulders because no coat had ever truly expected him. The children stood with them, scrubbed and solemn and shining. When the vows were spoken, Eli's voice shook once. Cecily held his hand tighter. No gold lay on any table that day. Afterward, supper was served at Widow Mesa. Not fancy, but plentiful. Bread, beans, chicken, coffee, cake, peaches, and butter soft from the heat. The repaired fence caught the sunset. Curtains moved in the kitchen window. The hens settled. Horses grazed beyond the corral. The porch boards, once gray with neglect, held children's bare feet, muddy boots, and the legs of neighbors who had learned, late but not too late, to sit kindly. That night, after the last plate was washed and the last child tucked under quilts, Cecily stepped onto the porch. Eli stood there with 2 cups of coffee. "You kept it warm," she said. Learning, she took the cup. Across the yard, moonlight silvered the pump, the barn roof, the woodpile stacked high for winter. In the upstairs window, a lamp glowed where Ruth was likely reading when she should have been asleep. Nell's marigolds sat in the kitchen, drooping but bright. Somewhere in the house, Tom's wooden lamb watched over dreams that no longer needed to run. Cecily leaned her shoulder against Eli's arm. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. "The mercantile?" "Yes. What do you remember most?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Not the gold," he said. "Your empty pail." She closed her eyes. "I was so ashamed of it." "I know. And now?" He looked through the window at the table where 8 places had become 9, then 10 whenever a neighbor stayed, then something beyond counting. "Now I think empty things can be filled," he said. Cecily rested her hand over his. The porch held them there while the New Mexico night widened around the ranch, full of cricket's song, cottonwood whisper, hoarse breath, and the soft, ordinary sounds of children safe in their beds. Once, nobody had wanted the orphan girl or the hungry children gathered behind her. Then a lonely rancher laid gold on a table, and it mattered because it bought time, bread, and a road out of danger. But gold was never what made the home. The home was made by hands that stayed.